The telegram arrived on a Thursday morning in September 1882, and Adelaide Porter knew her life was about to change forever, though not in the way she imagined. She stood in the cramped boarding house room in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, holding the thin paper with trembling fingers. Her aunt's sharp voice echoed from downstairs, demanding payment for yet another week's lodging. Adelaide had no money left. Her father had died 6 months prior, leaving nothing but debts and disappointment. Her mother had passed when Adelaide was 12, and now at 21 years old, she found herself completely alone in a world that had little patience for unmarried women without means. The telegram was from a man named Xavier Garrett, a rancher in Yreka, California. Her late father had served with his father during the war, and somehow word had reached him about her circumstances. The message was brief and businesslike. He needed a wife. She needed security. He would send travel money. She could decide when she arrived if the arrangement suited her. Adelaide read the words 3 times, her heart alternating between hope and terror. California seemed like another world entirely, a place of wild landscapes and rough men. But what choice did she have? Her aunt had made it clear that charity had its limits, and Adelaide had reached them. She had been raised to be obedient, dutiful, and demure. Surely those qualities would serve her well as a wife, even to a stranger on the far edge of the continent. She sent her acceptance that same day. 3 weeks later, Adelaide stepped off the stagecoach in Yreka, California, covered in dust and exhausted to her bones. The journey had been longer and more grueling than anything she could have imagined. Her dark hair, once neatly pinned, hung in limp waves around her face. Her best dress, a modest gray cotton that had seen better days, was wrinkled beyond recognition. She clutched her small carpet bag, which contained everything she owned in the world. Yreka was smaller than she expected, a collection of wooden buildings nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. The September air was crisp and clear, so different from the humid thickness of Philadelphia. Men on horseback moved through the wide dirt street. A few women in practical clothing hurried along the wooden sidewalks. Everything seemed rawer here, less refined, more immediate. "Miss Porter." Adelaide turned toward the voice and found herself looking up at a tall man with sun-weathered skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore worn denim pants, a blue cotton shirt, and a leather vest. His eyes were a striking shade of hazel, green and gold mixed together, and they studied her with an expression she could not quite read. He was perhaps 28 or 29, with broad shoulders and calloused hands. This had to be Xavier Garrett. "Mr. Garrett," she said quietly, dropping her gaze as she had been taught. A proper woman did not stare boldly at men. "Just Xavier, please," he said, and his voice was gentler than she expected. "Welcome to Yreka. I imagine you're tired from the journey." "I am well enough, thank you," Adelaide replied, though her body ached from weeks of travel. She kept her eyes downcast, waiting for him to tell her what to do next. Xavier picked up her carpet bag, and she noticed him frown slightly. "This is all you brought." "It is all I have," she admitted, feeling shame color her cheeks. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Well, we will make do. Come on, the wagon's this way." Adelaide followed him to where a sturdy wagon waited, pulled by 2 horses. Xavier helped her up onto the seat with a steady hand, then climbed up beside her. As they began moving through town, he pointed out various buildings. "That's the general store where we get most supplies. The church is down that way, though the circuit preacher only comes through once a month. There's a schoolhouse, but it's small. We have a doctor, which is more than some towns can say." Adelaide listened, filing away each piece of information. She wanted to ask 100 questions but held her tongue. Her aunt had impressed upon her that men did not appreciate chattering women. They rode in silence for a while, leaving the town behind. The landscape opened up into rolling hills dotted with oak trees. The vastness of it all made Adelaide's chest tighten. She had never seen so much open space. "The ranch is about 5 miles from town," Xavier said. "It's not the biggest spread, but it's good land. I run cattle mostly, some horses. I have 2 men who help with the work, Miguel and his son Tomas. Good people. They have a cabin on the south end of the property." "I understand," Adelaide said softly. Xavier glanced at her. "You don't have to whisper. I don't bite." She felt her cheeks warm again but did not know how to respond. Instead, she folded her hands in her lap and kept her eyes forward. After another stretch of silence, Xavier said, "I should tell you what I expect from a wife." Adelaide's stomach tightened. This was it. The moment when she would learn what her new life would hold. She had assumed she would cook, clean, bear children, and obey. That was what marriage meant, was it not? Her own mother had lived that way, quietly serving her father's needs until illness took her. Adelaide had prepared herself to do the same. "I am listening," she said. Xavier seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "I need someone who can work alongside me. Ranch life is hard and there is always more to do than hours in the day. I need a partner, not a servant. Someone with opinions and ideas. Someone who can make decisions when I am out with the cattle. Someone who will tell me when I am being a fool." Adelaide blinked, confused. That did not sound like any description of marriage she had ever heard. "I do not understand," she said hesitantly. "You want me to argue with you?" Xavier laughed, a warm sound that surprised her. "Not argue exactly, but I want honesty. I want a helpmate, Adelaide. Someone who stands beside me, not behind me." She struggled to process this. Everything she had been taught about being a proper wife seemed to contradict what he was saying. A wife was supposed to be obedient, submissive, quiet. She was supposed to defer to her husband's judgment in all things. "I was taught that a wife should obey her husband," Adelaide said quietly, feeling confused and off balance. Xavier was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was serious. "My mother was like that. She never spoke up, never shared what she thought or felt. My father was a hard man, and she just endured. When she died, I realized she had spent her whole life making herself smaller and smaller until there was hardly anything left of who she really was. I do not want that. I would rather be alone than have a wife who is afraid of me." Adelaide did not know what to say. This was so far outside her understanding of how the world worked that she felt adrift, unmoored. They reached the ranch as the afternoon sun began its descent toward the mountains. The house was a single-story wooden structure, larger than she expected, with a wide porch across the front. There was a barn, a corral with several horses, and various outbuildings. Everything was neat and well-maintained, though clearly built for function rather than beauty. Xavier helped her down from the wagon and led her inside. The house was simple but clean. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace, a sturdy table with chairs and cabinets along one wall. There were 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. "You will have your own room," Xavier said, gesturing to one of the doors. "I will not press you into anything you are not ready for. When you are comfortable, if you are ever comfortable, things can change. But there is no hurry." Adelaide stared at him, completely bewildered now. What kind of man brought a woman across the country to marry him and then offered her a separate room? "I do not understand what you want from me," she said. And for the first time, there was a hint of frustration in her voice. Xavier set her carpetbag down and turned to face her fully. His expression was kind but serious. "I want you to be yourself. I want to know who Adelaide Porter really is, underneath all the rules you have been taught about what a woman should be. I want a companion, a friend. Eventually, maybe more, but only if that is what you want too. But why would you marry someone for companionship? Adelaide asked, genuinely confused. Men marry for heirs, for someone to manage the household for property, for free labor. Xavier shook his head. Maybe some men do, but I have been alone for 5 years since my father passed. I have had plenty of time to think about what I want, and what I want is someone to share this life with. Someone who cares about the ranch as much as I do. Someone who will challenge me and laugh with me and build something together. Adelaide sank into one of the chairs at the table, her legs suddenly weak. This was nothing like what she had prepared herself for. She had steeled herself to endure, to serve, to obey. But partnership, friendship, she did not know how to do those things with a man. She barely knew how to do them with anyone. I do not know if I can be what you want, she whispered. Xavier pulled out another chair and sat down across from her. Then let me ask you this. What do you want? No one had ever asked her that before, not once in her entire life. Adelaide looked at him, at this stranger who had brought her to the edge of the world and was now asking her the most difficult question she had ever faced. What did she want? I do not know, she admitted, and tears suddenly blurred her vision. I have never been allowed to want anything. Something shifted in Xavier's expression, a sadness mixed with understanding. Then maybe that is where we start. You figure out what you want and I will be patient while you do. He stood and moved to the kitchen area, giving her space. Adelaide wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed by her tears. She watched as he filled a kettle and placed it on the stove to heat. I can do that, she said automatically, starting to rise. I know you can, Xavier replied, but I can do it too. This is not a test, Adelaide, I am just making coffee. She sat back down slowly, feeling utterly lost. Everything she knew about how men and women interacted seemed useless here. Xavier moved around the kitchen with easy competence, clearly accustomed to caring for himself. When the coffee was ready, he poured 2 cups and brought them to the table. Tell me about Philadelphia, he said, sitting down again. What was your life like there? It was such a simple question, but Adelaide found it difficult to answer. Her life in Philadelphia had been small and constrained. After her mother died, she had lived with her father, keeping house for him, rarely leaving their small residence. After his death, she had moved to her aunt's boarding house, where she had helped with cooking and cleaning in exchange for a cramped room. There had been no friends, no adventures, no joy to speak of. It was very quiet, she said finally. I did not go out much. My father preferred I stay home. Did you have friends, things you enjoyed doing? Adelaide shook her head. My father said friendships were frivolous. I read sometimes when there was time. I liked to read. What kinds of books? She hesitated. Her father had disapproved of novels, calling them silly and improper. But she had snuck them from the library anyway, reading late at night by candlelight. Stories, she said quietly. Adventure stories, mostly, about people who traveled to distant places and had exciting lives. Xavier's face lit up with interest. I have some books, not many but a few. You are welcome to read anything you like. And when the supply wagon goes to town next, you can order more if you want. Order books, Adelaide repeated, surprised. Books were expensive. Why not? If reading makes you happy, then we should have books. This casual generosity, this easy assumption that her happiness mattered, was so foreign to Adelaide that she did not know how to respond. She sipped her coffee, which was strong and hot, and tried to make sense of this strange new world she had entered. Over the next few days, Adelaide tried to find her footing. She woke early each morning and prepared breakfast, cleaned the house, and attempted to establish some kind of routine. But nothing worked the way she expected. Xavier did not demand his meals at specific times. He often cooked himself if he came in from working and she was busy with something else. He washed his own dishes. He even did his own laundry, much to her shock. "I have been taking care of myself for years," he explained when she protested. "I do not expect you to wait on me hand and foot." But if she was not here to serve him, what was her purpose? The question gnawed at Adelaide, making her anxious and uncertain. She felt like she was failing at being a wife, but she did not understand the rules of this new game. On the fourth day, Xavier asked her to ride out with him to check on the cattle in the northern pasture. Adelaide had never been on a horse before, and she was terrified, but she agreed because she did not know how to refuse. Xavier saddled a gentle mare named Daisy and helped Adelaide mount. He was patient as she clumsily settled into the saddle, showing her how to hold the reins and how to use her legs to guide the horse. "Daisy is the sweetest horse we have," he assured her. "She will take care of you." They rode slowly out across the ranch, Xavier on his own horse beside her. The September morning was beautiful, the air clear and cool, the sky an endless blue. Adelaide gripped the saddle tightly at first, terrified of falling, but gradually she began to relax. There was something exhilarating about being up so high, about moving across the landscape like this. Xavier pointed out features of the land as they rode. The creek that provided water for the cattle. The stand of oak trees where the animals liked to shelter from the afternoon heat. The boundary markers that separated his land from the neighboring ranch. "How much land do you have?" Adelaide asked. "About 800 acres. It is not huge, but it is enough for a decent herd. I am building it up slowly, investing in good breeding stock." He talked about his plans for the ranch, his ideas for improving the grazing rotation, his hope to eventually expand into horse breeding. Adelaide listened, fascinated despite herself. There was passion in his voice when he talked about the land and the animals. This was clearly not just a business to him, but a calling. When they reached the northern pasture, they found the cattle grazing peacefully. Xavier dismounted and walked among them, checking for any signs of illness or injury. Adelaide watched from horseback, marveling at how gentle he was with the animals, how observant on the ride back. Adelaide found herself asking questions. What kind of cattle were they? How did he decide when to sell them? What were the biggest challenges he faced? Xavier answered each question thoroughly, seemingly pleased by her interest. "You have a good head for this," he said at one point. "You ask the right questions." The compliment warmed her in a way she had not expected. When had anyone last praised her thinking rather than her obedience? That evening, as they sat at the table after dinner, Xavier said, "I have been thinking about the marriage ceremony." Adelaide's hand stilled on the dish she was drying. They had not discussed this directly, though it hung between them like an unanswered question. "The circuit preacher will be here in 2 weeks," Xavier continued. "But I want to be clear about something. If you decide you do not want to go through with this, I will help you find another situation. I will not trap you here." Adelaide set down the dish slowly. "Why would you say that?" "Because I can see you are uncomfortable. You do not know what to make of me, and I have clearly disrupted every expectation you had about what marriage would be." He was right, of course. But the thought of leaving, of starting over yet again in an unfamiliar place, filled her with dread. "Where would I go?" she asked quietly. "There are families in town who need help. The school teacher has been looking for an assistant. The doctor's wife wants someone to help with her children. You would have options, and you would help me. Even though you brought me here to marry you," Xavier met her eyes steadily. "I brought you here to give you an opportunity, not to imprison you. I want you to stay, Adelaide. I will not lie about that. But I want you to stay because you choose to, not because you have no other choice." Something cracked open in Adelaide's chest, a feeling she could not quite name. This man was offering her freedom, even though it would cost him, even though he would be alone again. That kind of selflessness was beyond anything she had known. "I need to think," she said. "Of course. Take all the time you need." Adelaide lay awake that night in her small bedroom, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet except for the occasional creak of wood and the distant sound of an owl. She thought about Xavier's offer. She could leave, start fresh as a schoolteacher's assistant or a mother's helper. It would be a safe, predictable life, but something in her rebelled against the idea. For the first time in her life, she was in a place where someone wanted to know what she thought, what she wanted. Xavier challenged her to be more than the obedient shadow she had been raised to be. It was terrifying. It was also intoxicating. She thought about the ride that morning, the feeling of the horse beneath her, the vastness of the land spreading out in all directions. She thought about Xavier's passion when he talked about his plans for the ranch. She thought about how he looked at her, not with demand or ownership, but with curiosity and respect. What did she want? She wanted to stop being afraid. She wanted to discover who she might be if she was allowed to become someone. She wanted to stay. The next morning, Adelaide found Xavier in the barn, tending to the horses. She had dressed carefully, though her limited wardrobe offered few choices. She had pinned her hair neatly and gathered her courage. "I have decided," she said from the doorway. Xavier looked up, his expression carefully neutral. "Yes, I want to stay. I want to marry you." She saw relief flash across his face, quickly followed by something that might have been joy, but he did not rush toward her or celebrate. Instead, he set down the brush he had been using and walked over slowly. "Are you certain? This is not because you feel you have no other option." "I am certain that I want to try," Adelaide said, and she meant it. "I do not know how to be the kind of wife you want. I will probably do everything wrong, but I want to learn." Xavier smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "Then we will learn together. I do not have all the answers either, Adelaide. I just know what I do not want and what I hope for. We will figure out the rest as we go." He held out his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Adelaide took it. His palm was warm and calloused from work, and his grip was firm but gentle. It was the most intentionally intimate thing that had passed between them, this simple clasp of hands. "Thank you for staying," Xavier said quietly. "Thank you for asking me to," Adelaide replied. Over the next 2 weeks, something began to shift between them. Adelaide started to relax, bit by bit, letting go of some of the rigid rules she had always lived by. She asked more questions. She offered opinions, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. Xavier listened to everything she said with genuine interest, sometimes agreeing, sometimes offering different perspectives, always treating her thoughts as valuable. He taught her to ride properly, and she discovered she loved it. There was a freedom in riding across the open land that she had never experienced before. The world had always been so small, so confined. Here, it was endless. She met Miguel and his son Tomas, who worked on the ranch. Miguel was in his 40s, weathered and quiet with kind eyes. Tomas was 19, eager and hardworking. They treated Adelaide with respect, and she found herself gradually relaxing around them too. Adelaide also began to experiment in the kitchen, trying recipes she had only read about before. Xavier praised everything she made, even when things did not turn out quite right. When she burned a pie crust one afternoon, frustrated and embarrassed, he simply laughed and said they could scrape off the worst parts. "Food is just food," he said. "It is not a measure of your worth." That idea was so radical to Adelaide that it stopped her in her tracks. She had been raised to believe that a woman's value lay in how well she performed domestic tasks. But Xavier seemed to value her for entirely different reasons. He noticed when she made observations about the ranch. When she suggested a better way to organize the tack room, he implemented her idea immediately. When she pointed out that one of the horses seemed to be favoring its left front leg, he checked and found a small stone lodged in the hoof. "You have a good eye," he told her, and she glowed with the praise. The circuit preacher arrived on a bright Sunday morning in early October. The small church in Yreka filled with townspeople who had come to witness the wedding. Adelaide wore a new dress that Xavier had arranged for the seamstress in town to make. It was simple but beautiful, a soft blue cotton with delicate white embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She had never owned anything so lovely. As she stood beside Xavier in front of the preacher, Adelaide's hands trembled. This was real now, irrevocable. But when she glanced up at Xavier, she found him looking at her with such warmth that her fear eased. The preacher led them through the traditional vows. Love, honor, cherish. In sickness and health, for better or worse. Adelaide spoke the words clearly, meaning them more than she had expected to. This was not the marriage she had anticipated, but it was becoming something she genuinely wanted. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Xavier leaned down and kissed her gently, briefly. It was Adelaide's first kiss, and though it was chaste and quick, it sent a shiver through her entire body. Afterward, there was a small celebration at the church. The townspeople were friendly and welcoming, curious about the new Mrs. Garrett. Adelaide found herself relaxing as the afternoon wore on, enjoying the conversations and the festive atmosphere. Several women offered to visit her at the ranch, and she accepted their invitations gladly. When they returned home that evening, Adelaide felt the weight of expectation settle over her. This was their wedding night. She knew what was supposed to happen, though her knowledge was vague and tinged with dread from whispered warnings about a wife's duty. But Xavier simply helped her down from the wagon and said, "You must be exhausted. It has been a long day." Adelaide nodded, uncertain. "Get some rest," Xavier said gently. "Nothing has to change tonight or tomorrow or until you want it to." The relief was so intense that Adelaide's knees went weak. "Thank you," she whispered. "Adelaide," Xavier said, and she looked up at him. "I meant what I said about being partners. That includes this. I will not take anything you do not freely offer." She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat, and retreated to her room. But as she lay in bed that night, Adelaide found that relief was not the only thing she felt. There was also a strange disappointment, though she could not quite understand why. Xavier was being respectful, giving her time and space. That was good. So why did part of her wish he had pushed? Just a little. The answer, she realized, was that she was beginning to want things, and that scared her more than anything else. Autumn deepened, and life on the ranch settled into a rhythm. Adelaide grew stronger and more confident. She learned to help with tasks she had never imagined doing before. She could now saddle her own horse, mend fences, even assist with the cattle when needed. Her hands, once soft and pale, developed calluses. Her face gained color from hours spent outdoors. Xavier was patient with her learning process, never mocking her mistakes or making her feel inadequate. When she struggled with something, he showed her different approaches until she found one that worked. When she succeeded, he celebrated with her. They talked constantly, about everything and nothing. Adelaide discovered that she had opinions about all sorts of things she had never been allowed to express before. Xavier encouraged her to share them, sometimes agreeing, sometimes debating with her. Those debates became some of her favorite times, the thrust and parry of ideas, the way he respected her thinking even when he disagreed. She also discovered his sense of humor. Xavier could be playful, teasing her gently about her initial fear of the chickens, or the way she still sometimes forgot to latch the gate properly. But it was never mean-spirited, and Adelaide found herself laughing more than she ever had in her life. One afternoon in late October, they were riding back from checking on the southern herd when a sudden rainstorm blew in. Within minutes, they were both soaked to the skin. Xavier led them to a small line shack on the edge of the property, a rough shelter used by ranch hands during cattle drives. Inside, it was dry but cold. Xavier quickly built a fire in the small stove while Adelaide stood shivering, her wet clothes clinging to her body. When the fire was going, Xavier turned to her with concern. "You need to get out of those wet things. You will catch your death." Adelaide's eyes widened. "I do not have anything else to wear." Xavier pulled off his own wet shirt, revealing a muscled chest and abdomen that made Adelaide's breath catch. He draped the shirt near the fire to dry, then pulled a blanket from a trunk in the corner. "Wrap yourself in this. I will turn around while you change." He did as he promised, facing the wall while Adelaide fumbled with her wet clothing. Her fingers were clumsy with cold and nervousness. She stripped down to her chemise and drawers, then wrapped the blanket around herself. It smelled like wood smoke and leather and something that was distinctly Xavier. "You can turn around," she said quietly. Xavier turned back and his eyes met hers. Something sparked between them, an awareness that had been building for weeks. Adelaide felt her pulse quicken. "Come sit by the fire," Xavier said, his voice slightly rough. They sat together on the rough wooden bench, close enough that Adelaide could feel the heat radiating from his skin. The fire crackled in the stove. Outside, rain pounded on the roof. "Adelaide," Xavier said after a long moment of silence, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here?" She considered the question seriously. Was she happy? The word seemed too small for what she felt. She was challenged, engaged, alive in ways she had never been before. She was also frequently frustrated, often uncertain and sometimes terrified of making mistakes. But underneath all of that was a bone-deep satisfaction she had never known existed. "Yes," she said, "I am happy." Xavier smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. "Good, I am happy too." "Are you?" Adelaide asked, surprised. "I am not what you expected, I think. I know so little. I make mistakes constantly." "You are better than what I expected," Xavier said seriously. "You are brave and smart and willing to try new things even when they scare you. Do you know how rare that is?" Adelaide shook her head, unable to process the compliment. Xavier reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek, warm and gentle. "I am falling in love with you," he said quietly. "I thought you should know." Adelaide's heart stopped, then started again at double speed. She stared at him, searching his face for any sign of insincerity, but found only honest affection. "I do not know if I know how to love someone," she whispered. "I think you do," Xavier said. "I think you have been doing it without realizing it. The way you care for the animals. The way you have embraced this life even though it is nothing like what you knew. The way you look at me sometimes when you think I am not paying attention." Adelaide felt heat flood her cheeks. Had she been so obvious? "I am afraid," she admitted. "Of what? Of disappointing you. Of not being enough." Xavier's hand moved to cup her face fully, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You could never disappoint me, and you are more than enough, Adelaide. You always have been." He leaned forward slowly, and this time when he kissed her, it was not brief or chaste. His lips moved against hers with gentle insistence, and Adelaide felt something ignite inside her. She had never known a kiss could feel like this, like fire and safety all at once. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Adelaide rested her forehead against Xavier's. "I think I am falling in love with you too," she whispered. "It terrifies me." Xavier laughed softly. "It terrifies me as well, but I would rather be terrified with you than safe alone." They stayed in the lined shack until the storm passed and their clothes dried. They did not speak much, but they sat close together, hands intertwined, watching the fire. Something fundamental had shifted between them, a door opening that could never be fully closed again. When they returned to the ranch that evening, Adelaide paused at the door to her bedroom, then turned to Xavier. "I do not want to sleep alone anymore," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Xavier's eyes darkened with something that made Adelaide's stomach flip. "Are you sure?" "I am sure that I want to be your wife in all ways. I am sure that I trust you. The rest we can figure out together." Xavier closed the distance between them and kissed her again, deeper this time with a passion that made Adelaide's knees weak. He lifted her easily, carrying her to his room, their room now, and laid her gently on the bed. What followed was tender and sometimes awkward, but filled with so much care that Adelaide found herself laughing and gasping and eventually crying with the overwhelming emotion of it all. Xavier was patient, attentive, constantly checking that she was all right, that she wanted to continue. And Adelaide discovered that she did wanted him, with an intensity that shocked her. Afterward they lay tangled together, Adelaide's head on Xavier's chest, his fingers trailing through her hair. "I never knew it could be like that," Adelaide said softly. "I was told it would be a duty, something to endure." Xavier's arms tightened around her. "It should never be just duty. It should be joy." Adelaide tilted her head to look up at him. "You have given me so much joy, not just tonight but every day since I arrived. You have given me myself, Xavier. I did not know I was missing until you showed me what was possible." "You gave me something too," Xavier said. "You gave me hope. I had resigned myself to being alone, to building this ranch with no one to share it with, and then you walked into my life and changed everything." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, and Adelaide had never felt safer or more cherished in her life. The winter months brought new challenges and new joys. Adelaide discovered she had a talent for managing the ranch's finances, and Xavier gratefully turned over the bookkeeping to her. She created systems for tracking expenses and income, and her careful management helped them realize a larger profit than Xavier had seen in previous years. She also began to establish friendships in town. The women who had offered to visit made good on their promises, and Adelaide found herself part of a community for the first time in her life. She joined a weekly quilting circle and discovered she enjoyed the creative work and the conversation in equal measure. Xavier taught her to shoot, patiently helping her learn to handle the rifle safely. It was a necessary skill on the ranch, where predators sometimes threatened the livestock. Adelaide proved to be a decent shot, and she felt a fierce pride in her growing competence. They celebrated their first Christmas together, simply but joyfully. Adelaide used some of her egg money to buy Xavier a new saddle blanket, and he gave her a beautiful leather-bound journal and a set of fine pens. She had mentioned once, months ago, that she wished she could write down her thoughts and experiences. He had remembered. That night, by the light of the fire, Adelaide made her first journal entry. She wrote about the journey from Philadelphia, about her fear and confusion when she first arrived, about the gradual blooming of love between her and Xavier. She wrote about discovering who she was when she was allowed to be free. Spring brought calving season, which meant long days and nights of hard work. Adelaide worked alongside Xavier and the ranch hands, helping to deliver calves and care for the newborns. It was exhausting, messy work, but she loved it. There was something miraculous about bringing new life into the world. One evening, After a particularly difficult birth that had resulted in a healthy calf and relieved mother, Xavier found Adelaide in the barn, sitting in the hay with the calf's head in her lap. "You are going to spoil him," Xavier said, but his voice was warm with affection. "He deserves to be spoiled after what he went through to get here," Adelaide replied, stroking the calf's soft fur. Xavier sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "You were amazing today. I could not have done this without you." "Yes, you could have," Adelaide said. "You have done it for years without me. But it is better with you. Everything is better with you." Adelaide leaned her head on his shoulder, content. "I feel the same way." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the barn settling for the night. Then Adelaide said, "Xavier, I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "I think I might be pregnant." Xavier went very still. Then he turned to look at her, his eyes wide. "Truly?" Adelaide nodded. "I am not certain yet, but I think so." Xavier's face split into the widest smile she had ever seen. He pulled her close, careful not to jostle her, and kissed the top of her head. "That is wonderful news. How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," Adelaide admitted, "but also happy. I never thought I would be a mother. I never thought I would want to be. But now, with you, I can imagine it. I want to raise children with you, Xavier. I want to build a family." "We will do it together," Xavier promised, "just like everything else." Adelaide's pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor a few weeks later. The news filled both of them with joy and anticipation. Xavier became even more protective, constantly worrying that Adelaide was doing too much. She had to remind him regularly that pregnant women were not made of glass. "I am not going to break," she told him exasperatedly one afternoon when he tried to prevent her from lifting a basket of laundry. "I am growing a human being. I think I can handle a basket." But his concern came from love, and Adelaide found she could not truly be annoyed with him. Instead, they negotiated. She would be sensible about what tasks she took on, and he would stop hovering quite so much. As her belly grew, Adelaide found herself marveling at the changes in her body. She had always been taught to ignore her physical self, to treat her body as something shameful that must be hidden and controlled. But pregnancy made that impossible. Her body was doing something powerful and important, and she could not help but feel proud of it. Xavier seemed to find her growing belly fascinating. He would place his hands on it, feeling for the baby's movements, talking softly to the child they had created together. Those moments filled Adelaide with a tenderness so profound, it sometimes brought tears to her eyes. In the late summer of 1883, Adelaide gave birth to a son. The labor was long and difficult, but when the doctor finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, Adelaide felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. "He is perfect," Xavier whispered, sitting beside the bed with tears streaming down his face. "Adelaide, he is perfect." They named him William Xavier Garrett after Xavier's grandfather. William was a healthy baby with a strong set of lungs and his father's hazel eyes. Xavier proved to be a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings and changings, walking the floor with William when he was fussy. "My father never did any of this," Xavier told Adelaide one night as he rocked their son. "He thought it was women's work, but how could I miss this? How could I not want to be part of every moment?" Adelaide watched her husband with their child and felt her heart swell. This was what partnership looked like. This was what love looked like. As William grew from infant to toddler, Adelaide marveled at the life they had built. The ranch was thriving under their joint management. They had expanded the herd and were beginning to develop a reputation for quality breeding stock. Adelaide's careful financial management had allowed them to save money and invest in improvements. But more than the material success, it was the quality of their life together that filled Adelaide with gratitude. She and Xavier were true partners, sharing both the work and the joys of their life. They made decisions together, supported each other's ideas, and weathered challenges as a team. Adelaide had also grown in ways she never could have imagined. She was no longer the quiet, obedient girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Yreka. She was confident, capable, and unafraid to speak her mind. She had opinions and ideas, and she shared them freely. She had friendships and a place in the community. She had become fully herself. When William was 2 years old, Adelaide became pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect. She gave birth to a daughter in the spring of 1886. They named her Grace Adelaide Garrett. Grace was a quiet baby, content to watch the world with serious dark eyes. She adored her older brother, and William proved to be a gentle and protective sibling. Watching her children play together, Adelaide sometimes had to pinch herself to believe this was really her life. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset while the children played in the yard, Xavier reached for Adelaide's hand. "You remember what I said when you first arrived?" he asked. "About wanting a partner, not a servant," Adelaide smiled. "I remember. I thought you were insane." Xavier laughed. "I know you did. You looked at me like I was speaking another language. You were, in a way. I had to learn a whole new way of thinking about what it meant to be married, what it meant to be a woman. Do you ever regret it? Do you ever wish you had married someone more traditional, someone who would have let you just follow the rules you were taught?" Adelaide considered the question seriously. Had her life been easier if she had married a man who expected obedience and submission? Perhaps. It certainly would have been less challenging, but it also would have been a half-life, a shadow existence. "Never," she said firmly. "You gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. You gave me permission to become who I really am. You saw me, Xavier, when I could not even see myself. How could I ever regret that?" Xavier brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "You gave me the same gift. Before you, I was just going through the motions, building the ranch because it was what I was supposed to do. But you made it all mean something. You made me understand what I was really building. Not just a successful business, but a home, a family, a life worth living." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching their children play. William was showing Grace how to stack rocks, his little face serious with concentration. Grace watched her brother with adoration, trying to copy his every move. "They are going to grow up so different from how we did," Adelaide observed. "William will never think his worth is measured by how much land he owns or how many cattle he can manage. Grace will never think she has to make herself small to be acceptable. We will teach them that people are partners, not property," Xavier agreed. "That strength comes in many forms. That love is about respect and equality, not dominance and submission. The world might not be ready for children raised with those ideas," Adelaide said with a smile. "Then the world will have to catch up." As the years passed, Adelaide and Xavier's partnership only grew stronger. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, celebrated good years, and struggled through difficult ones. They expanded the ranch, adding more land and diversifying into horse breeding as Xavier had always dreamed. Adelaide's business acumen proved invaluable, and she developed a reputation in the territory as a sharp negotiator. They had 2 more children, another son they named Thomas in 1888, and a final daughter, Clara, born in 1891. Their home was filled with noise and laughter, with the organized chaos of a large family. Xavier remained a devoted father, as involved with the children as Adelaide was. They taught all their children to read and write, to ride and shoot, to think critically and speak honestly. The older children began to help on the ranch as they grew. and Adelaide made sure both the boys and girls learned all aspects of the work. Her daughters could rope and ride as well as their brothers. Her sons could cook and sew alongside the ranch work. She wanted all of her children to be complete people, not limited by arbitrary rules about what was appropriate for their gender. The community sometimes whispered about the Garrett family's unconventional ways, but no one could argue with their success. The ranch was one of the most prosperous in the region. The Garrett children were well-mannered and hardworking, and anyone who spent time around Xavier and Adelaide could see the genuine love and respect between them. Adelaide continued to write in her journal, documenting the life they were building together. Sometimes she reread those early entries, marveling at the frightened, confused girl she had been. That girl had been so certain she knew what marriage meant, what her life would be. She had expected obedience and duty, service and submission. Instead, she had found partnership and love, challenge and growth. She had discovered that she was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. She had learned to think for herself, to trust her own judgment, to take up space in the world instead of trying to make herself invisible. And it had all started because one man had the wisdom and courage to say he wanted a partner, not a servant. On their 10th wedding anniversary in October of 1892, Xavier surprised Adelaide with a trip to San Francisco. It would be their first time away from the ranch and the children, who would stay with Miguel and his wife. Adelaide was nervous about leaving, but also excited for the adventure. San Francisco was overwhelming in its size and noise and crowds. Adelaide clutched Xavier's arm as they navigated the busy streets, but there was also wonder. They stayed in a fine hotel, ate at elegant restaurants, visited museums and theaters. Adelaide bought books and fabric and toys for the children. Xavier bought her a beautiful necklace with a small diamond pendant. "You should have pretty things," he said when she protested the expense. "You work so hard. You deserve to be spoiled a little." On their last night in the city, they attended the opera. Adelaide wore a new dress she had purchased, a deep blue silk that made her feel elegant and sophisticated. As they sat in the plush seats, listening to the soaring music, Adelaide felt Xavier take her hand. She looked at him, this man who had changed her entire life, and felt overwhelming gratitude. He had challenged her to grow, supported her transformation, celebrated her strength. He had never tried to diminish her or control her. Instead, he had helped her become more fully herself. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," he whispered back. "More than I can ever express." The music swelled around them, and Adelaide leaned her head on Xavier's shoulder, content. They returned home to find the children well and the ranch running smoothly. Life resumed its familiar rhythms, but Adelaide carried the memory of their trip like a treasure. It was proof that their life was not just about work and responsibility, though those things were important. It was also about joy and beauty and shared experiences. As their children grew older, Adelaide and Xavier began to see the fruits of their unconventional parenting. William, now a young man of 9, was thoughtful and kind, as comfortable helping his mother with cooking as working cattle with his father. Grace, at 6, was fierce and independent, already declaring that she was going to run her own ranch someday. Thomas and Clara were still small, but already showing signs of the same confidence and capability their older siblings possessed. "We are raising good humans," Adelaide said one night as they prepared for bed. "Not just boys and girls, but good people." "We are," Xavier agreed. "Because we are showing them what a real partnership looks like. They will never settle for anything less in their own lives." Adelaide smiled as she brushed out her hair. "Grace already told me she will only marry someone who treats her as an equal. She is 6 years old, and she already knows that. She learned it from her mother, Xavier said, coming to stand behind Adelaide. He took the brush from her hand and gently drew it through her hair. "You are the most remarkable woman I have ever known." Adelaide met his eyes in the mirror. "I am only remarkable because you let me be. You gave me room to grow, Xavier. You believed in me before I believed in myself. I just saw what was already there. You did the hard work of becoming who you are." It was an old argument between them, each trying to give credit to the other. But it made Adelaide smile because it was proof of their partnership. They built each other up, celebrated each other's strengths, supported each other's growth. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Miguel passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1894, and the whole ranch mourned the loss of the kind, hard-working man who had been part of their family. Tomas took over his father's role, bringing his own young family to live on the ranch. The continuity of it, the passing of generations, felt right to Adelaide. In 1895, a severe drought struck the region. Many ranchers struggled, some even lost their properties. But Adelaide and Xavier's careful management and financial planning allowed them to weather the crisis. They were able to help some of their neighbors, buying cattle at fair prices when others were forced to sell at a loss, extending credit at the general store they now partially owned. "We have been blessed," Adelaide said as they surveyed the ranch one evening. "We have a responsibility to help others when we can." Xavier agreed, and together they worked to support their community through the difficult time. When the rains finally returned in 1896, the town held a celebration, and the mayor publicly thanked the Garretts for their generosity and leadership. As Adelaide stood beside her husband, surrounded by their children and their community, she reflected on how far she had come. The frightened 21-year-old who had arrived in Yreka 14 years ago would not have recognized the confident, capable woman she had become. That girl had thought marriage meant obedience, that a woman's role was to serve and submit. But this woman knew that true partnership meant mutual respect, shared decision-making, and equal voice. She knew that love was not about one person giving up their identity for another, but about two whole people choosing to build a life together. She knew that strength came not from dominance, but from collaboration. And she knew that she and Xavier had created something special, something that would ripple out through their children and grandchildren, through their community and beyond. They had shown that there was another way, a better way, to build a marriage and a family. In 1899, as the century drew to a close, Adelaide and Xavier gathered their family for a photograph. It was a new technology that had recently come to Yreka, and Adelaide wanted to capture this moment in their lives. William, now 16, stood tall and serious beside his father. Grace, 13, had her mother's determined expression. Thomas, 11, could not quite suppress his mischievous grin. And Clara, 8, held her parents' hands, the baby of the family though not a baby anymore. As the photographer prepared his equipment, Adelaide squeezed Xavier's hand. They had weathered so much together, built so much. And they were not done yet. There were still years ahead, still dreams to pursue, still challenges to face. But they would face them together, as partners, as equals, as two people who had chosen each other and kept choosing each other every day. The flash powder ignited, capturing the moment forever. A family united not by dominance and submission, but by love and respect. A testament to what was possible when two people committed to being partners in every sense of the word. That night, after the children were in bed, Adelaide and Xavier sat on their porch as they had done countless times before. The stars wheeled overhead, brilliant in the clear sky. The land stretched out around them, the ranch they had built together through hard work and shared dreams. "Do you ever think about that first day?" Adelaide asked. "When I stepped off the stagecoach, so certain I knew what my life was going to be," Xavier chuckled. "I think about how terrified you looked, how you would not even meet my eyes." "I was terrified. You were nothing like what I expected." "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" Adelaide turned to look at her husband. The years had added lines to his face and gray to his hair, but his eyes still held that same warmth and respect that had first drawn her to him. He was still the man who had seen her potential when she could not, who had challenged her to become more than she had ever dreamed possible. "It is the best thing that ever happened to me," she said softly. "You saved my life, Xavier. Not by giving me shelter or security, though you gave me those things too, but by showing me that I was worth more than obedience, that I had value beyond my ability to serve, that I deserved to be a partner, not a servant." Xavier pulled her close and Adelaide rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him. Leather and wood smoke, sage and sunshine. "We saved each other," Xavier said. "I was so lonely before you came, Adelaide. I had the ranch, I had work, but I did not have purpose. I did not have joy. You brought both into my life. You made me better. You challenged me and supported me and loved me. You gave me a family and a future. You are my greatest blessing." They sat in comfortable silence, wrapped in each other's arms under the vast starry sky. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built something beautiful and lasting through commitment and hard work and mutual respect. The new century was dawning, full of promise and possibility. Their children were growing strong and capable, ready to make their own mark on the world. The ranch was thriving, a testament to what could be achieved through partnership and shared vision. And Adelaide and Xavier were as in love as they had ever been, perhaps more so. Their bond deepened and strengthened by years of walking side by side through all that life brought. As the night deepened and the temperature dropped, they finally went inside, hand in hand. They checked on their sleeping children, pulling blankets up and placing gentle kisses on foreheads. Then they retired to their own room, the room they had shared for nearly 17 years. In the morning, there would be work to do. Cattle to tend, books to balance, children to raise. The everyday challenges and joys of the life they had built together. But tonight, there was just this. Two people who had chosen each other, who continued to choose each other, wrapped in love and gratitude and hope for all the years yet to come. Adelaide fell asleep in Xavier's arms as she had done thousands of times before, secure in the knowledge that she was exactly where she belonged. Not as a servant or an inferior, but as a partner, as an equal, as a woman who had found her strength and her voice and her purpose. The Wild West was changing. The frontier was closing. The world was moving into a new era. But the love between Adelaide and Xavier remained constant, a beacon of what was possible when two people committed to building something together based on mutual respect and genuine partnership. And in the morning, when the sun rose over the California mountains, it would rise on a family united, a ranch thriving, and a love story that would echo through generations. A reminder that true partnership, true equality, true love was not just possible but transformative. Adelaide had thought marriage meant obedience, but Xavier had shown her that the best marriages were built on something far more powerful: respect, trust, and the courage to see each other as true equals. And in that seeing, in that choosing, they had created something that would last long after they were gone, a legacy of love, a testament to partnership. A proof that when you treat your spouse as a partner rather than a servant, you create not just a marriage, but a foundation for a life well lived, a family well raised, and a love that endures through all the seasons of life. Their story was not unique in its challenges or its setting, but in the conscious choice they had made every day to honor each other, to support each other, to build together rather than one ruling over the other. And that choice had made all the difference. As dawn broke over the Garrett ranch on a new day, a new century approaching, Adelaide and Xavier slept peacefully, surrounded by the life they had built, secure in their love, ready for whatever the future would bring. Together,